What is the meaning of life? What is the point of living this life? This is a question that every philosopher has sought the answer for. But most of the times, when we're thinking about these questions, we're sitting comfortably in our beds or looking out the window and hearing the pitter-patter of the rain. But imagine if you were thrown in a Nazi concentration camp just because of your religion, which is basically a death sentence because your chances of survival were 1 in 28. Facing certain death, would you be able to think philosophically about this topic? What is the meaning of life? That's what Viktor Frankl had to face during World War II when he was thrown in a concentration camp by Hitler. He was separated from his family and kept in absolutely terrible conditions. When he got out of the camps, he decided to compile all the lessons he had learned and sought to create his life's work. That's when he wrote Man's Search for Meaning. Now you might be thinking, what is the practical use of thinking about such big questions? Even if you figure out the meaning of life, how will that help you in your daily life? To answer that, I want to tell you about Giveup-itis. Viktor Frankl tells us that a lot of times you would be able to tell if someone's about to die just by looking at their attitude in the concentration camps. Most people would daydream about life after the camps, meeting their families, etc. But if they all of a sudden stopped talking about these things, became very depressed and lethargic, and couldn't see the meaning in their lives, they would eventually become weak and die. So for these people, finding the meaning in their lives literally meant saving their lives. Viktor Frankl says, those who have a why to live can bear with almost any how. For example, a lot of times people get into careers that they have absolutely no interest in. It's not surprising then that they give up on the first few hurdles because they don't really have their why sorted out. But if their why was clear, they would be able to push past whatever problems they were facing because their why would be their North Star. Now let's come to the most important topic that most people get wrong. When you think about the meaning of life, you have to understand that there is no single meaning of life. It's not a mathematical solution where the answer is always the same. In actuality, it is us who give life its meaning. So the meaning of life is whatever you decide it is for you. Viktor Frankl suffered the most atrocious living conditions a human being can go through, but he still found his freedom. How? He says that no matter what situation you're in, there's always something that is in your control, and that is your attitude. There's a lot of people who actually have pretty decent lives, but their attitude is still very negative. And on the other hand, there's people like Viktor Frankl who can keep a good attitude even in a concentration camp. So naturally the question arises, if life has no inherent meaning and if it's up to us to give life its meaning, how exactly do we do that? According to Viktor Frankl, there are 3 ways of giving your life meaning. Number 1 is work. When Viktor Frankl reached the Auschwitz concentration camp, all of his belongings were seized. He had a manuscript with him and that was taken away from him as well. Now this manuscript was really important to him because it basically contained his life's work. But because he was determined to finish his manuscript, Viktor didn't let anything get in his way. He would find little scraps of paper to continue writing it while he was in the camps. Frankl used to think about how his manuscript would be his unique contribution to the world, and if he didn't complete it, it would be a loss for the whole world. So in the concentration camp, he used his work to give his life meaning. Most of the victims who had their work to think about had higher chances of survival. So think about what unique contribution can you give to this world. Sometimes people forget that their work is actually valuable to the rest of the world. If a teacher really takes their work seriously, they could change the life and mindset of hundreds of children. If a musician takes their craft seriously, they could produce music that the world couldn't live without. Number 2 is love. Love is the second way of giving your life meaning. When we talk about love, we're not just talking about romantic love that you see in the movies. In the book, Viktor Frankl gives us an example of a patient who used to live with her disabled son. She had tried to commit suicide but was stopped by her son. She could not find any meaning in her life. Viktor Frankl asked her to imagine herself at 80 years old. She had a life filled with pleasure, but she had not taken care of her son. How would she feel then? After thinking about it for a bit, the woman replied, "Yes, you're right. If I give my son a good life, that will make my life more meaningful." So this woman found meaning in her life because of her son. When you love someone, it basically means that you can see their true potential and you do everything you can to help them fulfill that potential. Most of the love we see in the movies is selfish love. It's only about what you can get from the other person. But the kind of love that gives your life meaning is the kind where you see the other person's potential and you help them become the best version of themselves. The third way of making your life meaningful is suffering. There is no guarantee that we will find the kind of work we want to do or find love, but suffering is almost guaranteed for us in one way or another. Almost everybody, to various degrees, will suffer in life. When Viktor Frankl was suffering in the concentration camps, he would imagine himself standing in a lecture room and teaching his students about his experiences. Because of this, he was able to transcend his suffering, and his suffering became more meaningful. When you're able to give your suffering a meaning, it becomes more bearable. So whenever you're going through a hard time, try to ask yourself what your suffering is teaching you. Some of the most compelling stories always involve some kind of struggle, because that's what gives any accomplishment its meaning. By the same token, in my opinion, this book is 100 times more meaningful than other books simply because the person writing them has suffered so much. So I highly recommend you get this book to learn more about Viktor Frankl's thoughts. That's all for now, and thanks for watching.